a process of catharsis, grappling between my different identities, or break down those walls and remove this idea that
இதோட visual narrative பார்த்தோம்னா அதுல வந்து how much do you participate?
search is a constant thing.
പറയുവാനിതാദ്യമായി വരികൾ മായേ ഊപ്പുകേ മൗസം കോ ഊപ്പേ ബംഗാരമായനെ and all I wanted to is see cause right now I'm seeing limitless anadi nidanadi arariraro raro raro
Welcome to Cinema Rendezvous.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the kind words. I was kind of taking it all in. It's very sweet.
How do you go about arranging the music, shaping the song, not just the lyrics, musically, and also the visual narrative for this song particularly, because we've all seen it now?
Yeah. So I wrote this song. I started writing in like 2015, 16. And it's just generally, I think when I started writing my own music and when I kind of started just wanting to build this sonic, conceptual, lyrical universe that I felt was my own, it was very much a process of catharsis. I think just taking my own experience, thoughts, observations, and getting to put it into sonic, lyrical form was just a freeing experience in a way.
15-16 வயசுல இது எழுதினீங்களா?
No, 2015. So that time I was like 25. That's when I started writing this song. It started with that brown man, what do you see? That line. And you know, I grew up in the US, so there was always this kind of grappling between my different identities, or what I thought were two separate identities, the American and the Indian. Through the process of making this particular song, I kind of was able to break down those walls and remove this idea that our identities are somewhat like silos, isolated from each other. That's what I used to think growing up. And I think it was also my way of just reckoning between having these very different aspects of myself. Making this song, making that whole album was my mechanism to just tear down those walls completely and realize and embrace the idea that as human beings, at any given moment, we're like this constant spectrum and flow of various emotions, feelings, identities, and like a prism or a kaleidoscope rather. When you, any different way the light kind of strikes on it, it will shine something different, very subtly. So that was the process of making that album, that understanding of it. And I made the whole thing in my bedroom in Fremont, California, where I grew up. Just, you know, it started off as just this deep-seated need to get this idea out of my own body and out of my own mind, and it finally manifested in this whole album. So that was the process.
So இதோட visual narrative பார்த்தோம்னா அதுல வந்து how much do you participate? இல்ல do you have another director, you've written the lyrics, recorded it, வேற ஒருத்தர் interpret பண்ணி அது உங்களுக்கு visuals கொடுக்கறாங்களா இல்ல do you only work with it?
I'm pretty integrally involved. I will say that I don't have any like education in the visual medium, but I do know what I gravitate towards and I like. With this song, it was the first step, I guess, in experimenting in how to bring to life this these various shades of my identity on screen. It was definitely an experiment. Even while watching it, there's multiple things I'm like, oh, I wish we had done this differently or that differently. But, you know, in the West at least, there's just so little by way of representation, the South Asian experience. I wanted to be able to kind of just bring to life this very nuanced and particular experience that is mine. You know, I was born here in Chennai, but grew up in the States. And the way my career has really kind of evolved over the years, it's had me coming back here and now spending more time here than I do in the States. So I wanted to be able to kind of bring to life this idea of going back and forth, but just also establishing one reality that doesn't really look at either place as entirely different. Because, you know, at the end of the day, the roots might be different, but the way different ideas, emotions manifest, there's so much of an overlap. So yeah, I was pretty involved in this particular visual, and it was a learning experience. You know, I think the visual medium is just brings another level of dimension to music. So understanding that, exploring that, was a challenge but also satisfying.
சிட் உங்கள் பாட்டில் வந்து எப்பவுமே ஒரு ஏர்னிங் இருக்கும், ஒரு கன்ஃபியூஷன் இருக்கும். அண்ட் அதுலேருந்து கடைசியில் இப்போ என்ட்ரோஃபியில் பார்த்தோன்னா கூட டுவர்ட்ஸ் தி எண்ட் லாஸ்ட் சாங், ஐ திங்க் லிமிட்லெஸ் இஸ் த லாஸ்ட் சாங், அது ஒரு செலிப்ரேட்டரி மோடில் வருது. பட் தெர் இஸ் அ ஹோல் ப்ராசஸ் கிராஃப் அண்ட் யுவர் வாய்ஸ் கம்ஸ் அவுட் வெரி வெல் இன் தட். இஸ் தட் சம்திங் யூ கேன் ஜஸ்ட் புட் ஆன் இன் ஜஸ்ட் யுவர் வாய்ஸ், ஆர் டஸ் இட் ஹாவ் டு கம் ஃப்ரம் அ சர்ச் இன்சைட்? How is it for you?
Yeah, I think the search is a constant thing. I think, see, this feeling of angst, chaos, and then the search that comes from that, I think that's something that everyone goes through, especially in this day and age that we live in now when, I mean, I made this album pre-pandemic, but I think the pandemic and what has come with it has, you know, really shown the mirror to the fact that there's so much going on within ourselves that we never even choose to address or look at or explore. For me, music has just always been that mirror. It's provided me with the instruments and the tools. I mean instruments, not musical instruments, but just the tools to be able to look at myself, excavate both like the pain, but also the joy and everything in between. And this, I think, has not only been with regards to my original music. With my original music that I write, I get to put lyric to it and so on, but even with the film work I've done, you know, there's a certain yearning in most of my songs that I've sung for film. And whenever I see, melody, if you look at it, is just like a more abstract form of expression than lyric. Lyric gives you like the literal, this is how I feel or whatnot. But when I go into film recordings, there's always something, when I choose the song that I want to record, there's something about it, a seed of some sort that really has emotionally just grabbed me. So even that is an exploration, a journey to figure out, okay, how do I take these emotions that live deeply within myself and completely just surrender to a melody and pour that into a song. And I think my belief is that if these emotions exist deep within myself, they definitely exist deep within either everyone or a lot of other people, and we're just yet to really kind of discover it. With Carnatic music, the same thing. It provides me a whole other dimension of exploration because of how highly improvisational it is. For many, I think the idea of improvisation in the context of Carnatic music is a technical exercise, but the real beauty is when you get beyond, when the technique is all settled and you have your frameworks in place and you've studied the form long enough, where you can start pouring your emotion into that as well and discovering new aspects of yourself, the same mirror, when you can find those moments where you're shining light on something that you didn't even know existed within you. I think that's what music is at its most accessible. You know, I don't think this is an idea of like fine art or, I think when music is most accessible and made and created with the intention of uncovering these deep-seated emotions, that's when people really resonate. You know, I think that's when, and I'm still finding out different ways to do that. To this day, I think I've been, you know, blessed with these opportunities and instances where I've gotten to lend my voice to songs that allow me to explore it that way. I've gotten to write my own music. You know, just there's different spheres, but there's so much more to still explore within myself and then share with the world for hopefully them to also discover within themselves.
நீங்கள் வந்து ஒரு கர்நாடிக் மியூசிக் சபாவில் ரொம்ப கம்ஃபர்டபுளாக இருக்கீங்க, பக்கத்து மயிலாப்பூரில் உட்காந்துக்கிட்டு. அதே மாதிரி வெஸ்ட் கோஸ்ட்டில் ஹிப்ஹாப் சீனில் பயங்கர ஆப்ஸ்ட்ராக்ட் இன்டெலெக்சுவல் லிரிக்ஸ் எழுதிக்கிட்டும் கம்ஃபர்டபுளாக இருக்கீங்க. தெலுங்கில் பாடுறீங்க. இந்த வருஷம் பாடத் தொடங்கி 11-12 வருஷம் ஆறப்போ ஹிந்தியில் ப்ளேபேக் பாடியிருக்கீங்க, கன்னடா, மலையாளம், ஸோ எல்லா லாங்குவேஜ்லேயும் பாடியிருக்கீங்க. அண்ட் உங்களோட ப்ராசஸ் ஆஃப் மியூசிக் வந்து இட்ஸ் வெரி இன்டர்னலைஸ்ட். எந்த பாட்டை கொடுத்தாலும், யாரோட காம்போசிஷனை கொடுத்தாலும், எந்த நடிகருக்கு கொடுத்தாலும் அதில் சிட்டு கொஞ்சம் தெரிகிறாரு. ஆனால் அதில் சிட்டு வந்து எக்ஸ்டர்னலாக தெரியல, உள்ளுக்குள்ளே தெரிகிற ஒரு சிட்டாக இருக்கிறாரு. மொழிங்கிறது உங்களுக்கு எவ்வளோ இம்பார்ட்டண்ட்? எந்த மொழி வழியாக நீங்கள் எமோஷன்ஸை புரிஞ்சுக்கிறீங்க ஒரு கேரக்டருக்கு பாடுறப்ப?
Well, the funny thing is, I was just going to say, I think in English. Right? Like, I think எல்லாருக்குமே we have one language that exists in our brain. Language maybe perhaps our most sophisticated mode of communication. There's a lot of beauty attached to it, aesthetically, obviously, and then, but at the end of the day, it's a way to communicate. I believe that maybe the most powerful way of communicating isn't necessarily by way of language, but by way of like body language and emotional, different ways. And I think as our species evolves, we will find different ways to be able to talk to each other that doesn't involve necessarily words and stuff. I think it's just how society has evolved up until this point. And that's not to say that language isn't important. I think it's very important. It's also because of how aesthetically refined various languages are, there's so much pride attached to different languages. So for me, I think it's when I've sung in various languages, like I already said, I think in English. So to be able to still get behind the emotion of a certain language and the nuance of it, it just takes the studying of it. Now that kind of brings me to the idea of like, as human beings, we have finite amount of time in a day. There's 24 hours. Within that, we spend, let's say, like 7 hours sleeping, maybe a little bit more. But I've had to really kind of define my priorities in terms of what exists within me and what is pulling me towards it, right? So for me, language is what I said, this mode of communication, something that is a requirement when you're speaking, when you're singing a song, whatever. But like I said, I believe beyond language, there's just like this soul that exists. I think music is probably the most powerful way to bring that soul to life because it's an abstract form. But it's also a very sophisticated form that is like made up of layering things. There's a melody, there's rhythm, there's harmony, there's different sonics that come into play. So yeah, that's kind of like my take on language. I've learned to love the different languages that I've gotten to sing in. It's definitely been a challenge I've embraced. For example, like when I first started singing Telugu songs, which is maybe around like 2015, 16 as well, or maybe a little bit later. It took me a second to understand the nuances. Similarly, Malayalam is a song I've sung a little bit in, and it's been even more challenging because of the very nuanced ways the tongue is supposed to move. It's a whole world unto itself. See, I understood my calling at a young age, that music feels like it reverberates through my body. I feel that every second of every day. Now, I know there's people who feel that linguistics and language, that is the thing that makes them just... So it's a world that deserves to be discovered. Obviously, each language deserves the respect and a certain sense of love that you have to give to it, especially because it's like been passed down from generations. So these are also not just current day things, but every language is a testament of the times that we have come from and where we're going. Yeah, I kind of give you a rambling answer to that answer, especially since you asked me to start in Tamil.
No, it's interesting to listen to it. நான் வந்து யோசிச்சுட்டு இருந்தேன், எனக்கு நீங்கள் தமிழில் வந்து பாடுற லிரிக்ஸ், பிகாஸ் எனக்கு தமிழ் as a language ரொம்ப பிடிக்குங்கிறதுனால, though I predominantly speak in English, எனக்கு அந்த தமிழ் லிரிக்ஸ் கேட்குறப்போ இன்ஃபேக்ட் இந்த ஒரு 2-3 வருஷத்தில் வந்து தமிழ் பால் ஒரு திருப்பி சங்கம் லிட்ரேச்சர் படிக்கிற அளவு ஆசை வந்தது. அண்ட் சில பாடல்களை கேட்குறப்போ, இப்போ கர்ணனோட பாட்டு பாடினீங்கன்னா கூட அந்த வரிகளை விட அதில் இருக்கிற இசையில் தான் நீங்கள் இன்னும் இன்டல்ஜ் பண்ணுறீங்க இல்லையா?
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think the starting point, especially like, okay, for example, you mentioned the Karnan song, right? So Ullathil Nalla Ullam, when the first thing that pulled me towards that song was the actual scene from the film, which is so deeply based on the lyric and what is being communicated. So again, I think the language, when it's used potently, it has this ability to kind of, and also when it's used potently and it syncs up with music, when these two worlds kind of don't collide but start to flow with and within each other, what occurs is something that is deeply resonant and magical. So what really pulled me towards that was this, the lyric, and also how MSV sir had used Ahir Bhairav to just like kind of bring that to life and amplify it. I'll also say this, I think, like the human mind doesn't really have the ability, or at least mine, doesn't have the ability to like break down how I am experiencing something when I'm experiencing it. It is all just happening. Right? So I can't say that the language is the first thing I reacted to, or the music was the first thing, or the scene. It was just something that hit me, and I was like, well, what was that? And those moments happen sometimes when there's art or entertainment that is created to the level that it just cuts through everything else. So I don't know what it was that first pulled me towards, but it captured me.
உங்கள் காலிங்கை நீங்கள் புரிஞ்சுக்கிட்டீங்க. உங்களுக்கு மியூசிக் தான் அப்படிங்கிறது எப்படி தெரிஞ்சுது? ஏன்னா நடுவில் நீங்கள் மணிரத்னம் படத்தில் நடிக்க போகிறீங்கலாம் கூட ஒரு புரளி இருந்தது. நீங்கள் உங்களோட மியூசிக் ஆல்பம்ஸில் ஒரிஜினல்ஸில் பார்த்தா அப்படியே படுத்துட்டு பாடி ஏந்து ஜிப்பா போட்டு நடந்து தண்ணிக்குள்ளே காலை வச்சு எல்லாம் பண்ணியிருக்கீங்க. நடிப்பு இல்லை பாடல் தான் எப்படி உங்களுக்கு தெரிஞ்சுது?
There's this idea of surrender, right? There's points in time that without even having the conscious like knowledge that this is happening, where you can feel something else kind of taking over you, right? Some people call it God, other people call it the universe, whatever it is. Those moments are to me moments of surrender, and from a young age, maybe like from when I was 10 or 12, that's as far back as I can kind of remember, but there's these instances where I'd be singing, not necessarily even on stage, sometimes just at home practicing, where it would feel like something else took control and I was just along for the ride. Those were the moments that confirmed to me that this is what I had to do with my life, because there was nothing else that gave me that. I'm not even going, it's something deeper than satisfaction or joy, or it is just, okay, this is why I exist. You know, understanding that a calling or again, just a very existential thing, you know, and I felt that at a young age, and I didn't, again, consciously understand exactly what it was at first, but I knew that I needed to chase those moments as much as I possibly could for the rest of my life. You know, and they're fleeting. Sometimes they last for like 10 seconds, other times maybe 3 minutes. I haven't yet had this experience where it lasts for more than that, you know, and maybe that is something that will come later on in life, is meant to come later on in life. But yeah, those points, as I grew older, I understood that that's what surrender is. You know, the ability to forget one's ego, and the kind of more trivial aspects of who we think we are, and just give yourself completely to a moment that means way more than Sid Sriram as an individual or anyone as an individual means, you know? So that's what this pursuit has been ever since. Now, along the way, there's been various points in time, whether it was when I was in high school or studying in college at Berkeley, where you get distracted this way and that, because especially with the form as glamorous as like music, with all of its bells and whistles, and when I was younger, you know, there's this chase for celebrity stardom as well. You get pulled in various directions, but I've been blessed with just a family core unit, and also I think just like the mindset to always bring me back to this pursuit. And then once I was able to identify that, realizing that this pursuit isn't this like highbrow, elitist kind of thing. You know, the most powerful moments I think are when you take it's like, I think the word entertainment almost gets like a bad rap. It's like a dirty word in certain ways amongst artists, because they think that is in some way dumbing something down. But I really realized, damn, these phones are going off today. No, I really realized that the most spiritual, the most grounding, the most groundbreaking internal experiences occur when those moments of accessibility happen. You know, when this pursuit is going on and you share that pursuit and you see thousands or hundreds or two or however many people, you know, crying through the song with you. You know, these are just, there have been points of confirmation of why I do this. And like, it started young, and I'm still, the chase continues even now. You know, it's a constant everyday thing.
Can you tell me about how this pandemic phase was for you, especially the first phase when all of us were just confused, we didn't know, and music was such a solace for many of us. அந்த டைமில் the things you churned out. I know எங்கள் அப்பா வந்து சர்ஜரி முடித்த உடனே ஹனுமான் சாலிஸ் கேட்டார், உங்களோட வெர்ஷன். அவர் வேறு யாரோடதும் ஒரு பர்டிகுலர் ஹனுமான் சாலிஸ் எம்எஸ் தான் கேட்பார். And then he heard this, and from then he just changed.
That means a lot.
So tell us about that phase, and when you were sitting alone in the room and singing, and how was this pandemic phase for you? Because it's good sharing for all of us. We've all gone through different
things.
Sure.
You know, everything I'm saying now and articulating, especially that last answer, I think were realizations that really consciously clicked for me during the pandemic. Adikla Minala, when like 2019, I was like constantly moving. There was shows every day sometimes. There was always recordings going on. It was like just going at one fever pace, just like going. And I enjoyed it, but I also think I was probably maybe at my most unhealthy, just in terms of like no exercise, really bad sleep cycles and all that. Then suddenly, I call it the great equalizer, but the pandemic hit, and I was in Chennai when it first hit, and then we went back to the States to isolate over there. It was just like an unprecedented time that, we're still finding our way through. For me, those initial moments, and I'm sure this is something that all of us kind of felt and faced, but there was great chaos, there was a lot of angst, deep fear, and not just like personal existentialism, but as a whole species. Like that was something that is just like so profound. I'm still wrapping my head around it. But I remember like a week after, maybe not even a week after I got back home, whenever me and my mom are in the same place, like around the afternoon, around like 2 or 3 o'clock, we sit down and I'll practice, she'll listen, sometimes she'll teach me something new. But that day particularly, I chose to just revisit a Tirupugar that she taught me when I was much younger. And like halfway through, I just like lost it. I started bawling. I wasn't sure why. And those moments, especially with Carnatic music specifically, they'll happen every so often, where inexplicably I'll just like start crying when I'm singing. And it happened at that point. I couldn't understand why. I knew it had to do with the fact that the whole world was going through this deep shift of sorts. But I just, I used that, I guess, as a sign that even though everything was going to be at a standstill for the foreseeable future, that all these plans that we made, that I made, that I'm sure everyone had made, that there were this thing called music that you can't put into words completely, you can't explain it in a sentence, it just exists. And it just was a lifesaver, honestly. I just sat at home, and there were certain mornings when, you wake up and you stare at the ceiling for like 20 minutes before even getting out of bed, because you're like, what the hell is going to go on today? There's the same thing. And then, I got to sit down and I started recording new music. I practiced a lot, about like 3 hours every day. I'd practice Carnatic music. The rest of the time I'd start writing new music. So that was the beginnings of what this next album that's going to be releasing later. That's what I used the pandemic for the most part. And it wasn't coming from a place of like, oh, I want to make this and I want this to like reach the whole world, or I want to achieve this level of success with this. It was just purely like, I need to do this every day to stay sane. The biggest blessing, there's certain times where you don't know exactly why you're putting yourself through a rigor or practicing a lot or whatever. And during the time of the pandemic, it all just kind of started to make sense that, music for me is larger than, it's afforded me this beautiful career, and there's obviously like the earthly aspects of having something to make money through, enjoying the attention, because obviously
the
it's
adulation,
great.
yeah.
But on a level far deeper than any of that, I realized that, okay, this was going to be, it's more than a friend or anything. It's just this form that exists and flows through everything. And it was my life source, that and the love of family were the two things that I learned to, I think we all understand these things subconsciously, but to be able to intellectualize it and make sense of it and have it be part of an actual thought process rather than just something that just exists in this like deep goo within like your soul, when you can actually start logically being like, this is what it is, this is why it means this much to me. And there's a certain beauty and solace, like you said, that comes from that. So that's what my pandemic was.
ஸோ உங்கள் மியூசிக்கில் எப்படி இருக்குது? ஒரு மேப் இருக்கும், அதை ஃபாலோ பண்ணுவீங்களா, இல்லை குட்டி இதில் ஹாப்பி ஆக்சிடென்ட்ஸ் நடந்திருக்கா?
Sure, I'm like a sucker for spontaneity.